Good morning and welcome to the Emerging Streaming Technologies session. My name is Chris Knowlton. I'll be the moderator. We're going to talk a lot today about some of the new technologies which are out there, many of which have been a source of hope for many folks, but then new legal and royalty questions come into play and suddenly they become more questions than answers. And so we're going to talk a lot about those. Which are the best technologies to use, given both some of the legal considerations and some of the technology considerations and where the market in general is headed. We'll start off by introducing the panelists. I have them just go down the row and introduce themselves very quickly, and then we'll jump into a bunch of questions, some of which I will ask as very leading questions, and we'll see where the conversation goes. As we go forward, too, we'll have the opportunity as we get near the end and we see how much time we have left for you to ask questions as well. So keep your questions in mind, and feel free to raise your hand as we get near the end if you have some that you want to pass on to the panel. All right, let's start here.
I'm Raul Dijou. I'm operations for AT&T's Uverse.com.
John Luther, JW Player.
I'm from Kaltura. I work on the player and live streaming products.
Will Law, I'm Chief Architect in Media Division at Akamai.
I'm Colleen from Facebook. I work on Facebook and Oculus and do basically video special forces.
Oh, check. 1, 2, check.
Check.
One,
Two.
check.
Testing,
Should I
testing.
speak? I'll lean back and speak.
1, 2, 1, 2.
We should probably close the doors at the back.
I hear Will, but I couldn't hear the rest of you.
Oh, can you not hear me?
You can. I can hear
I couldn't
myself.
hear Michael very well.
Check. Check.
Michael from Kaltura.
Check.
All right, who could you not hear?
Me?
Clap.
No, I think we could hear you.
No, I think you.
All of the above? Should we do it again? All right, let's start again, Raul.
I am Raul Dijou, video operations at Uverse.com, AT&T.
John Luther, JW Player.
Michael Dale, Kaltura.
Will Law, Akamai.
Colleen, Facebook, Oculus.
Okay, great. Thanks, and thanks for the feedback. All right, well, let's jump right in because we have a lot of topics and only an hour to cover them, and these are questions that I know the six of us could sit up here and talk about for hours. So let's start with codecs. For many years, the market's been converging towards broad support of H.264 video and AAC audio, and almost all the media players and browsers in the market now support those. HEVC, also known as H.265, seemed like it would become this default successor to H.264. While it takes more processing power to both encode and decode H.265, it does promise lower bit rates and makes 4K Ultra HD streaming feasible over many existing internet connections. Unfortunately, both MPEG-LA and HEVC advanced patent pools seem to determine to extract royalties for HEVC, some with unlimited caps, and that makes things more interesting when you're thinking about deploying a technology. So for our panel, let's start off with the first question. What effect have the new licensing terms from HEVC Advance and MPEG-LA had on HEVC adoption by the market? Where do you see that driving, that momentum that we've been seeing up until this point?
Would you like to kick it off?
No, I don't think I'm the guy here who would really, what I do moves a little bit slower than everybody else. So, in the studio world, we tend to kind of wait a little bit. Hasn't really made an impact to us because we really go more on standards. I mean, I wish we were more cutting edge and some of these, and be able to go and use the latest codec. But it doesn't make sense for us because it's not that self-publishing media where we have that large of a volume where it's really going to make a difference. But we have done a lot of tests, and going into the future in the next couple of years, the next platforms are definitely going to be either HVC or that next open source codec. Hopefully it's that next open source codec, but we do know that codecs take a long time. I remember showing, when I used to work at Apple in 2000, 2001, the first MPEG-4 stuff at I think it was Internet World or Macworld, one of those. And look, 15 years later, it's the standard, but it's taken a long time. So it'll take a long time for us to get to the next one. HEVC will probably be, in my opinion, adopted first, but hopefully it'll be something that will leapfrog it.
All right, any other opinions on how the royalties are affecting adoption?
So, yeah, to be clear, HEVC Advance is the bad patent pool that formed. They've since retracted from their 1%. They got spanked essentially by some very big companies. They said, there's no way we're paying that and we will see you in court.
And the big companies are the Alliance for Open Media in particular, which
No,
is
so they've all
Amazon,
basically,
Google,
there's a
Netflix.
forcing function of an alliance of companies who are substantial companies, essentially companies who have ways to make money other than licensing codecs. So they can afford to say, let's make an open codec here. And the best result of that may just be that it forces HEVC to have a patent pool much like H.264. So H.264 has a clear patent pool. You have to pay to use it, but nobody minds using it. It's a reasonable, it's fair, it's non-discriminatory. So I would expect if over time, over time HEVC will settle down to a similar patent pool. It's not there right now, but it'll probably happen quicker than it did in H.264, which also took quite a few years.
Yeah,
to
and the
settle
patent
down
pool
to
for
become-
H.264 took a while to evolve to that. There was
Yeah.
a scare there years back where like, oh my God, we got to use something other than H.264, and it resolved itself. So hopefully that'll happen with HEVC.
Yeah,
if they're smart.
Yeah, it bears remembering that there were two H.264 patent pools. There was one from VIA licensing and one from MPEG-LA, and it created all this. It's like any market, any uncertainty just freaks everybody out, especially a pool that is like HEVC Advanced, which is seen as very predatory because they sort of waited till everybody was, quote, this is an industry term, pregnant with HEVC. It was in all these devices. People were starting to implement it, and they pop up out of nowhere with this no cap royalty. It was just.
And how much do they want?
It was
0.5%
crazy.
of your
Yeah,
gross
I mean,
revenues?
Yeah.
And I talk to people like, oh, well, you know, for something like Apple, that's not a lot of money. Well, first, it's a lot of money. And
No, it's
second,
0.5% of Apple's gross revenues would be a lot.
right.
Yeah, it's a lot of money.
And it's not even if it was, even if someone like Apple were to be like, well, it's not, it's still the fact that they have to put up with these pools popping. Is there going to be a third? Are there going to be independent patent holders who don't want to be in any pool and then come after them for?
Is your mic on?
Oh, I think so. Can everybody hear?
Very quiet.
You got to project it.
You're pretty quiet.
Speak.
But
Anyway, so
you've-
yeah, I think HEVC is, I think it's now supported in Edge, but I mean, it's a total chilling effect, at least for browsers and free products, because they also are applying the patent to those. So if you have a browser that 1 billion people use and HEVC Advanced expects you to pay them, however, it's just, those browsers I don't think are going to implement HEVC anytime soon.
If you look at smart TVs, HEVC is inside every smart TV now. So there's large companies that are in the pool have committed to it in hardware. They can't take it out of those TVs.
And you have to pay the royalty back to the inception of when that device hit the market. It's just all
To a certain
way over the
extent,
top.
though,
It's
this is
crazy,
all
but-
inside baseball as far
Yeah.
as like how it all goes down. In reality, if you have to deliver video, you can't use HEVC. Like the workflow's not there, the signal flow's not there, the device support really isn't there. How are you going to use it? Like just because the chip is there, what's your signal flow? How are you actually going to create the video and deliver it to people? Good freaking luck. Now, you can do it with VP9, and you could do it 2 years ago. You can start using VP10 right now if you want. You can push software decoders that are super efficient in software to people's devices. If they have an installed app on an iPhone, you can do VP9 on an iPhone. You can do VP9 on Chrome, Firefox. It's going to be in Microsoft Edge. You can do it freaking everywhere, and there is a signal flow for it. You can use Wowza for live if you can figure out how to tune the encoding parameters a little bit.
You can use JW Player to play it back.
Yeah,
take that as
so
just
there's
one
actually a signal flow for it. Just because everyone and you know I've been
it's
sort
out
of
there
the
being used is another point, right? Like YouTube is using this
Yeah,
every day
yeah,
today and
absolutely.
already have the numbers to
Millions
back
of
up.
it
millions
works.
of hours.
And so the other thing is that there's so many things in the VP9 codec that people like. People talk at a very high level about codecs, but there's a lot of features to codecs and capabilities. I mean, they have scalability built into it. You can do a lot of really interesting things with that, not just for video conferencing, but for long tail content, spatiotemporal scalability, and people just talk about this high level, you know, H.264, H.265, HVC, / VP9 discussion. But in reality, there's like just a very clear matrix of support on devices and just signal flows. Like, can you make the video and can you deliver it to people? And the rest is all theoretical inside baseball. So there's a lot of people who will sell you pieces that can maybe do HEVC sort of, kind of, maybe right now, but please don't do it in production because we might get sued. But like, and so I don't want to speak to the legal part of the HEVC stuff just because it's irrelevant. I can actually deliver VP9 today, and it's great.
Well, speaking of that then, The Alliance for Open Media was recently announced, and it seems to have the goal of combining work from VP9, VP10, Cisco's Thor, and the DALA codecs into a new royalty-free codec for Ultra HD video. So given that, and given the things you've just said and some of the issues around HEVC, do we think that that is going to have an effect on HEVC being taken up in the market? Is adoption going to be there? Is this actually introducing some new royalty-free thing that's going to be ready for the market? Or is
It's going to
HEVC
take
too far
several
down the
years
road?
for any one of those codecs to get to a production-ready status. And Colleen talked about the workflow. We don't have, there's not as solid a HEVC workflow as there is today. It certainly isn't for Thor or DALA or anything approaching that. So the fastest thing that group could do would be to fast-track VP9 and VP10 and get
Right.
it out there.
Yeah.
Whether they
Well,
all
VP9 is out.
Sorry,
and
VP9's out.
VP10
VP10
is
is
out.
still from demuxed
So,
is
well,
a year and a
just
half
because,
ago.
I mean, you can build the encoder, you can build the decoder. I mean, you can play with DALA now if you have a million years for it to encode. They're shooting for down the road. But the thing that's really interesting about software decoders and the way that the Chrome Media team is working on this stuff is that they intend to release a new codec about every 2 years. The thing is, you can actually use it today. Like, what's really funny about Chrome is people are like, oh, Chrome has released this new feature that's been in Canary and in beta. It's all open source, right? So they're actually, if you want to ship your own decoders, which you can because they're open source, like you can ship VP10 today.
But why hasn't it been more adopted like VP9? Like since we've had it for 2 years, you're saying why is it? Is there some
Ever watch
reason
YouTube?
that? I mean, other than Facebook, maybe and
But Facebook and YouTube are the largest users of it.
So
Is Netflix doing VP9 now?
they are a member of the
They're
Alliance
the
for Open
Alliance,
Media.
yeah.
So they're not.
And
Or
so
they
I believe that partially it's in this echo chamber, in this like level of the industry, right? They're sort of like the stream media, which is kind of businesses, churches, porn, yada yada, and then there's the big companies that write their own stack, and basically anything external for the most part is for their own internal corporate stuff. But Google, Facebook, Amazon, whatever. I see those kind of companies have adopted it partially because they have the people who can look at it and have written the tool set. I've been working with Wowza and the Chrome Media team to be like, hey guys, can you commit to FFmpeg this, or can you put in Wowza, because I wanted a signal flow, for example, for VP9 Live, which didn't exist at the time. So you couldn't just go and buy the pieces were there for you to write it yourself.
Yeah, we have
but that doesn't make it turnkey. There's a difference between somebody who works for a church that wants to do streaming and can buy stuff, and there's simple documentation. But
So they can't just go out and buy it, and that's why maybe there's not as much adoption.
And also, H.265 is just one more, so people are expecting, and then people remember that VP8 didn't work, and there's very clear reasons why VP8 was not adopted. It just wasn't a clear win as far as selling point. Just being free and open when people already had H.264, it's like, why are you giving me something free when I already have something else, and now you're doubling my cache efficiency?
I mean, I totally believe in VP9, but what I'm saying is, like, I don't see it out there. Looking at, I look at a lot of over-the-top stuff. So like I said, I'm in more of the studio world, and I see stuff being done over the top in Europe, Asia, and Latin America. And in Latin America, so I haven't seen the adoption, which I expected it, because I'm like, who wants to be tied into the royalties?
Well, I think there's been a lot of like, ooh, scary ghost, you might get sued if you use it, sort of thing. But you could say the same thing about basically any
Anything.
video technology.
Yeah, I mean, we get patent people popping up.
I think it's that, most people who build streaming workflows are not codec nerds, and the Chrome Media team has sort of a internal customer with YouTube that is their
Yeah,
primary,
exactly.
and they throw out this great technology that isn't really, they're not selling it to you because they're not selling it to you.
They have their biggest customer right there, so it's like they have a perfect incentive to
So,
keep
but-
on bleeding edge.
But I think that there's going to be a pull from the industry because delivering video is very expensive, and the pipes are not getting it bigger fast enough.
So
And
do you
people
think
want-
4K is going to be the one that makes this happen?
I think
it's
people
only
are-
going to get more expensive, right?
People are going to want high quality 1080p absolutely everywhere, instantaneous, on mobile, and VP9 is like really the only viable way if you want to get extra efficiency past H.264 and actually deploy it today. Now, does that mean, and that's a separate question than why are people not, that's kind of a philosophical question, and does Google really care? They got what they need. It's not up to me to.
I'm just saying, for these kind of folks that don't all work for Google, like, why should they get VP9 when they don't see
Well,
it
I'm
as
saying,
a-
right, but I'm saying those are two
Yeah.
separate things. So why? I think it's pretty obvious, which is
Yeah.
it's the only thing you can actually deploy. Now, as far as like why it's not as popular, cool, you guys now know a secret sauce thing that other people don't know.
Make it popular.
Is anybody in here planning to deploy VP9? Okay.
Right, it's a very pragmatic decision, right? I mean, the cost and the investment that you have to do to your end-to-end workflow to implement an alternate codec when you're sort of, pulling together a solution from different off-the-shelf components in the market, it's just not a very pragmatic decision at this point to use, VP9.
But actually,
it depends on the example, though, right?
It depends on your signal flow and your tool set.
If you're going to applications or something, I think it's good. Like, I depend more on HTML5 apps and browsers and stuff.
Yep.
To me, it's like almost there, but
Well, HTML5 supports VP9 just fine.
Yeah.
And
But and I think now, but just
And
until
Dash does.
recently, it's been in all. Like, once Edge said it's going to support it, then you got Chrome's been supporting it,
Yep.
Mozilla's been
yeah,
supporting it.
well, the way I look at it
So-
is I treat H.264 as a necessary codec to have, and VP9 is the optimization codec for large, popular, big streams, important stream stuff where I want to spend the
And
CPU
for mobile,
time.
where you want to.
Right. And so I'm always going to have both. One is going to be the legacy
the best
support because there's so
experience,
many
but-
legacy devices, and I can deploy software decoders to those devices as well, but there's still going to be ones that don't have an update or something like that. So you're always going to have two of everything, right?
But
So-
there's an economic argument to be made. You might want three of everything, and that sounds crazy. But the reason you're going to go to VP9 and HEVC and H.264 is they save you money on delivery. So they cost you more because you have to encode another asset. They cost you more because you have to store another asset. But if you deliver it 10,000 times, you save money 10,000 times. So you can easily come up with a formula for when is it worth your while to encode that extra asset. You can look at your audience today, look at the platforms you're delivering to, which can play back VP9. You have an estimate of the playback units you need on those. Same for HEVC as it comes out. And then just every month, put it in a spreadsheet and figure out, is it worth my economic while to go to that codec?
Build it into your
do
dashboard.
the top 1% of your videos, and then figure
Yeah,
out, do you make it
units.
10%, 50%?
I did a study with like real world storage costing codec rates, nothing crazy out of this world. And for a 2.5-hour movie at 2 megabits per second, to make it worthwhile going to another asset that was saving me 30% on bandwidth, which is easy for VP9 or HOVC to do, I needed 266 views. Well,
If you use an
30%
X264, wow.
at 1080p, yes. Anyway, you needed 266 views per month to make it worthwhile. Now, a lot of you will get 266 views in a day or in 5 minutes. So certainly for short form content like
billion.
ads, or 8 billion if you're Facebook. If you're getting thousands of views in anything, it's absolutely worth your while to start exploring those niches in your target audience today, which can support the new class of codecs coming.
So is the answer then, if somebody out here is thinking, which codec should I go ahead and adopt for moving forward with 4K? Is the answer all of the above? Is it VP9? Is it HEVC?
Well,
I'd
hopefully-
love to hear
We've
from
done
each
a
of you
bunch
what
of
you think.
4K trials and production. I will say, and this is Akamai specific, everyone who's doing 4K with us is using HEVC. And it's almost universally going to smart televisions as the playback. So we're doing live 4K. The workflow does exist.
That's basically the
all
only place, though, is
yeah.
in embedded televisions, which, by the way,
Well,
over the next year, the
not
majority
true,
of all of them
'cause
have VP9
so now the
support and hardware,
NVIDIA Shields come out. So all the new Android, the Tegra-based chips coming out of
which
NVIDIA,
support VP9.
they support VP9 and HEVC.
Yep.
So we're starting to play back. You can get now $199 devices that do HEVC 10-bit. They have encoders that push it out. They have a workflow. As a CDN, we don't care what codec you use to workflow through our network. And we're also starting to use codecs for contribution, and we'll be allowing contribution in HEVC for our next generation live stream. So you can use either, or you can use both, but don't, my point is go and look at your audience today and see which can play it back. You'll be surprised at the number of devices that can certainly do VP9, and they're starting to do HEVC right now.
But you have to look at your tool set. I mean, if you want to take a look at the VP9 tool set right now, for live, the really only options are doing an FFmpeg workflow or a Wowza-based workflow, and the Wowza one is almost more of a technical preview in a sense. It's not, in the UI and pretty and stuff. And there's a lot of people out there. I've been talking to companies for years saying, like Elemental, I would love if you guys would put, VP9 in your product. And then there's this echo chamber of, well, nobody's asking for it. And it's like, well, nobody's asking for it because they're listening to you guys of what they should be doing, and you're telling them that. But So like the BitDash guys, wherever they are in here, Stefan, you're going to do it, right? I'm going to make you do it. But like, it's not that hard for you to put into your workflow. It's just one more codec that you're putting into the Dash profiles that you're generating, and you pop it. So I think you're going to see on at least services that I use a lot more of this stuff. And then I think that other ones are going to follow because people are going to start asking for it, and then people are going to realize that it's a defining feature, and just like HEVC. But if you look at the HEVC stuff that's available today, a lot of it doesn't connect up. You can't like how do you live stream with Wowza with HEVC? You got the DivX thing and the something player that you install, and it doesn't quite go to a browser. So
Right.
just, I mean,
All the pieces
both of
aren't
the
necessarily
workflows
there,
are kind of
especially for
wonky.
somebody-
But if you're more of if you have like an upstart service that's using, open source stuff that you're writing yourself, or you have, a newer company like the BitMovin guys who are doing like more, who can use those libraries very quickly and are not, opposed to, don't have a not invented here model, then, I think you'll see it very quickly.
So Michael, you've been nodding yes a lot with,
Yeah,
I'm
no, I
just
mean, I agree.
interested
I mean, I
in
think-
your quick view on which codecs somebody here in the audience should go with.
Ultimately, it's open to the customer. As a platform like Kaltura or JW for that matter, I mean, we enable the customers to choose these profiles. And we have active usage of VP9, of HVC.
Well, what's your slogan? Open source video?
Yeah, that's the slogan. Yeah, so I mean, it's an open source platform, and and so community implementations as well. But within the platform itself, people can deploy their own custom transcode profiles, and they can choose those. Whether we make that a default at some point really
have
comes
VP8.
down to those. Sorry.
You have VP8.
Yes,
It would just
VP8
be like
and
3 flags to,
Yeah. We also have VP9 as well
Okay.
within the platform.
Yeah, we're going to roll it out next quarter as well in our platform. in
This quarter,
Dash.
did you say this quarter?
Next quarter.
Next quarter, okay.
In Dash. We're actually doing VP9 Dash before 264 Dash and before HEVC Dash, because we've done a lot of tests.
The
and
support's there too.
The
It's
support's there, and it starts,
You-
I mean, for us, time to first frame is a very important
Yes.
metric. VP9 is 8 times faster in tests that we've done.
Okay.
Startup
and I
time,
would
yeah.
implore
So-
people to look at the data that the YouTube guys released. That I can't believe that they published their secret sauce, but like they showed the data on Quick and they showed the data on VP9 as far as what it did for audience engagement and quality, and it's wacky. But those slides are publicly available. The VP10 Summit on the WebM website has those slides, and the data is really impressive.
Let me just do a quick sound check. Can everybody hear all the speakers right now? Can anybody not hear all the speakers right now? Okay, just want to make sure. It's a little quiet up here sometimes, so I don't know. Okay, well, let's move on. We've spent a lot of time talking about the codecs. Let's go on to adaptive streaming formats. So Apple HLS is not a standard, but it has higher adoption currently than all the other adaptive streaming formats out there. Both Microsoft Smooth Streaming and Adobe's HTTP Dynamic Streaming have a smaller piece of the market, and they seem to be slowly fading. MPEG Dash is an international standard, the only adaptive streaming format with an international standard. And it arguably has a better feature set, but so far, as we've touched on here, it has lower adoption and doesn't run natively on iOS. In general, standards-driven groups favor Dash, such as many of the organizations in the TV hardware industry, as Colleen pointed out, while those who need play anywhere practicality prefer HLS. So, questions. MPEG-LA unexpectedly called for a Dash patent pool last July, even though major IP contributors had always said they wanted Dash to be royalty-free. How do you see that impacting Dash deployments?
I'll start. I don't think in my world it's going to impact it that much. I mean, if it does, if we got to switch, we got to switch. But I mean, we just moved to Dash everything because we like doing standards, and we weren't doing it before, and we found opportunity, especially when Chrome said goodbye to the Silverlight and all that. We said, hey, if we're going to do this right, we're going to do a Dash. Allows us to do multi-DRM headers, really start standardizing, and hopefully, I don't know if this is going to be the future or not, but really looking forward at, like I said earlier, HTML5 apps with MSE and EME, and going back to the browser and getting just kind of, putting our bet more on that. So hopefully it turns out. I think they'll figure it out. Something's got to figure out, because I think just Dash is just as a standard for everything going forward, just has a lot more to offer. Like for VR, I think the future of our industry, and there's going to be a lot of cool stuff when it comes to two-way protocols, but also like 360-degree video, when we get to that bandwidth. And so a lot of that stuff is already future spec'd in Dash, and it'll grow, and hopefully we can make that the next standard.
I don't think that pool is going to go anywhere. I mean, it's a call for patents. It's not even a pool yet.
Yeah,
And it's
okay.
ridiculous. Something like HTVC Advanced, you can see it being a threat because there's IP there. There's no IP to patent in Dash. It's a
And it's
manifest
very easy to
format.
make another streaming protocol.
You could do it in JSON instead of XML.
And in fact, the matter is, a lot of
You know,
people
so-
don't even, if you implement your own end-to-end implementation of like your encoder, you could just modify and make your own. Like it's a spec, it's a recommendation. You want to make.
But
your
then
own
you'd have
answer?
another lawyer, be on that one. I mean, because like.
No, I get it. My point being that come on, it's a manifest, and
Exactly.
Come on.
To have a patent on that is ridiculous because like.
But
They
I
just-
also
Dash is a particular way to write a text file and describe content.
Yeah.
So I
So
can talk
that
more
was a
about the
joke.
But there are
legal
some
stuff.
assumptions in it. So for example, Dash, most people when they talk about it, even though you can do MPEG-2 transport stream or Dash WebM or whatever, I mean, most people are talking fragmented MP4. You can make some.
Yeah,
you know.
Dash its usage has become synonymous with ISO-based media file
Yeah.
format, but you can use TS. But the people who created Dash, the main companies were Apple, Microsoft, Cisco, Netflix, and Qualcomm. And of those companies, everyone but Apple has made a public statement saying they will never ever charge royalties for Dash, which is great. They're the main protagonists in the development pool. So there were certainly other people in MPEG who helped to generate Dash, but they are not going to be one of the heavy hitters there. So it's very unlikely that any patent pool will be established, and it's certainly the hope of the Dash Industry Forum, which I run. Well, I'm the vice chairman. And we have 80 members, and every one of them would love there to be no patents for Dash, and we'll do everything we can to make sure that that happens. Nobody wants somebody licensing an XML standard and a combination of other standards, which is essentially what Dash is. We do want a single consistent format that we can get out there, because that's what brings interoperability. That's what makes
Which
stuff
was the point
work.
of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
meant to be a single way. It's not the greatest. It has its issues, but every other format does. But if we all focus on solving one set of issues, then we get further ahead than if we solve 3 different issues on everybody's different formats.
So let's assume that the patent pool issue is just a non-issue then. So the choices out there for our audience are to go with HLS or Dash effectively, right? As far as
So
adaptive
right now,
streaming
go with
formats?
both HLS and Dash. That's my position. Why? Because Apple has not got on the Dash train yet. And will they ever get on it? That's a question we get every single conference that we bring up Dash. I don't know. Apple made HLS. It's perfect for them. It's their standard. They control it. Roger Pantos puts out a draft every 6 months. That's exactly what Apple need for the next 6 months.
Right.
They'll be the last people on earth to not use HLS. But
Colin-
that doesn't mean it's right for everybody else. If you're a television manufacturer, or you're Google and you're YouTube, or you're
Facebook.
Facebook, is what's good for Apple necessarily good for you? Maybe not.
Well, I think, again, I'm glad we're off this pseudo-lawyer discussion because I'm totally not a lawyer and I don't want to get fired for making legal statements in any way. But in reality, again, if you want to support ABR everywhere that you can possibly support ABR, you need to have maybe some HLS in your workflow. But if you look at the matrix of support, the correct way to do this is you do Dash everywhere, and then the only place where you actually need HLS is for iOS web. If you have a natively installed app, you can do Dash in iOS, no problem. You can do Dash in Chrome, you can do Dash in Firefox. You can do Dash 264 in Firefox now. Now, if you have a legacy workflow that's generating HLS or old assets and you don't want to transmux them into Dash, there are cool tricks where you can do, like what the VBlast player does, or HLS.js, where you can transmux in JavaScript into Dash in the browser, which is a terrible hack. I've done it, but I'm not proud. I mean, it's kind of pushing off the work onto the clients and sucking up a bunch of their CPU. But I mean, there's no reason not to do Dash everywhere and then serve up HLS on the fly. Like, you can keep both assets. I mean, the truly like rock star way to do it is you do Dash everywhere, and then you do edge-based transmuxing on the CDN, because it's very expensive to go from, CPU-wise, to go from MPEG-2 transport stream to Dash, but it's cheap to go from Dash to MPEG-2 transport stream for HLS. So if you control your own CDN, or if you have like your own internal corporate CDN and you have Wowzer or something like that, the best way to do it is you keep in your cache and you deliver Dash to your 95% of people out there, and then you do HLS for
Just a quick repackage to HLS. Yeah.
But or you keep it around for the ones. There's no, you can even do Dash natively. Like like I said, you can do HLS in a browser if you use, the wacky transmuxing stuff. But that's all it's doing is repackaging into Dash in the end anyway. Just delivering Dash would be better in the first place. And for mobile, there's Dash players on all platforms. You can fall back if you use Dash and Flash, just like you can do HLS and Flash. The wacky thing, though, is that you can do on Safari, since Yosemite, Dash. And Netflix pushed that one. So I don't know, I don't know if the code base is the same
Well, you
for
can do
iOS.
MSC on Safari Yosemite, so you could.
Yes, and you can do Dash.
Yeah.
And so the question is, is the code base the same thing as the iOS mobile Safari one? Are they just behind, or are they intentionally not putting it there? Now there is a rule.
I think they intentionally don't give you access to that.
Well, there's a rule in the App Store that says, by definition, if you're doing live or anything longer than 10 minutes, you have to do HLS. And so they do hold some companies that you put into the App Store that you have to, in those scenarios, do HLS. In reality, I've heard that they've stopped enforcing that. I know a lot of companies who would love to stop delivering Dash on Wi-Fi and HLS on, because it's just silly. I mean, there's no, I seriously think the industry should band together and be like, just stop it, Apple. Just stop. I mean, there's no reason for,
Right.
and you can represent HLS within Dash. Like, there's no reason not to,
Just use Dash.
yeah.
Yeah,
Michael,
I think there's a lot of flexibility that's allowed to us because of the sort of the approach that we took, or the browser vendors took, to support Dash and sort of these lower level primitives as the base standards. And so we have things like the HLS.js, or we have things where people do variations of the Dash protocol in order to optimize it heavily for their use case, like YouTube. And I think that's been a really good development. In terms of like where we see Dash and HLS today, I mean, we primarily do HLS, and it's not because of just choosing one or the other. It's just there's basically a lot of weight around HLS in terms of what everybody's been doing for a long period of time, and it's the least common denominator. And because of those lower level primitives, you still have the flexibility to deliver HLS everywhere else as well. So as long as Apple sort of drags their feet a little bit, there's not going to be a big push for us to retool everything towards Dash. And when I say retool, I mean things like the server-side ad stitching, or server-side analytics based on manifest manipulations, or all these tools can easily be built with Dash as well. But there's just some inertia around the HLS spec combined with the least common denominator of Apple exclusively supporting HLS. Makes for a, well, as you know,
it's kind of like
uphill battle.
It's kind of like cord nevers in my generation, just not buying cable, right? It's not that that people were cord cutters. It's just that a different. So I think that if you're building a platform now, build it with Dash. If you have a legacy platform with HLS, you're saying there might not be a huge incentive to change it right now, but I think that HLS will slowly fade away as the Dash tool set becomes slightly easier to use, and as people building new platforms. So JW Player released a statistic, right, that said only 1% of our users are doing Dash. And then the Bitmovement guys released a statistic that say 80% of our users are doing Dash. And I think, as I said, whoever, I think it was Janos or someone who said it, and I was like, yeah, it's a generation gap, because the people who are coming to their platform are inherently new customers because they're new.
Plus they have Dash in the name of their company.
Yeah, and they're on the dashboard. No, it's true. But there's the thing about if you're buying, and they also have the transcoding, the packaging, and the player, so they're kind of solving the fact that the interop can be a little bit messy right now. So, but with you guys, right, a lot of people are like, woohoo, I've got a manifest, boop, done, great, awesome, call it a day.
We're very, people associate HLS with JW Player because we've been doing it a long time, and we're absolutely going to do.
But I think that you will find, as new people are looking for players, and that there will be an uptick in it, and not so much conversions of old platforms, but I think it'll be new platforms.
What about?
I agree.
When you look at the two platforms, though, one of the issues I think that might be impacting some folks would be the advertising workflow. How does advertising differ from Dash versus HLS, and how is that impacting adoption?
So with Dash, you can do client-side ads the same way you do any other format. It's basically a secondary video surface on top of your primary one. You can do the same ads on top of Dash as you do on HLS. But there's a big shift towards server-side ad injection, certainly, as we go forward because of the diversity of clients. With that,
And because ad blockers.
and ad blockers can take it out. Well, the ad blockers can start taking it out of manifest, too. I mean, they can see, if they can intercept the manifest request, then they can look for discontinuity tags or periods. So Dash does ads.
Unless you do transmuxing of
Which
the
an-
segments of the ads. which
Or you
a
do
lot of
H.
ads
Yeah,
do.
there's a lot of you can disguise your ads
I've written
as
my own
content.
very fun browser plugins just for myself. Please don't tell them. How
Well, there's a big shift towards TLS everywhere, so requesting both the segments and the manifests over HTTPS. When you do that, it's very hard for ad blockers to get in the way. We're going-
Especially if you're using EME, like,
Yeah, DRM plus, yeah.
But in terms of how our ads done, they're done with dynamic periods. You have an X link, you basically put a URL into your period. So as the Dash player receives what is a list of periods to play, it makes the request, it resolves it, it gets back from the ad decisioning engine a valid another Dash period, and it plays that content. And when it's done, it moves on. So it's a different mechanism to HLS, but it's very similar. And you can use server-side manipulation with the same flexibility that you can with HLS or with Smooth or its HDS for that matter. They're all very similar in how they would implement server-side injection of ads.
Michael, I thought I heard you mention DRM, and one of the things that I think is interesting is that if you're trying to play Dash on iOS and you have DRM protected content, I'm not sure what that workflow looks like. Does that work?
You can use the wideband
Especially-
SDK.
yeah, I mean, there's
Well,
the
it's
wideband
app only. It's app only, so you know it's not going to work in a.
I think overall, DRM is a similar situation in that you have to sort of have a multi-protocol, multi-DRM strategy nowadays. So you're going to be doing Widevine in the Google ecosystem, you're going to be doing PlayReady in the Microsoft ecosystem, you're going to be doing FairPlay in the Apple ecosystem, and that's basically what you go to market with as a video
but with
platform.
common encryption is your,
Yeah, common encryption.
Common
is your wrap.
encryption.
So you don't have to have
HOA.
completely
Well,
different
but
segments.
you build the platform in such a way that you package to the target. So with FairPlay, we're packaging to HLS. For common encryption, we're packaging.
unless you have 8 billion videos a data serve.
I mean,
That would get very,
it's done once and then
Would
packaged.
you would package just for one DRM
Yeah. Yeah.
on the fly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. The actual encrypted segments are cached on the CDN, of course, but you create them on the fly based on.
Well, why not just use common encryption and not deal with the dynamic
Yeah.
manipulation?
That's what we
It's-
did. We did common encryption, one file to store, not deal with any extra multi-DRM headers. We got PlayReady
Because-
and Widevine in our header, and we could have FairPlay if we wanted it, but we don't. We play to the browser, so it doesn't, you
Right.
know.
So on the iOS environment, if you want hardware DRM, it's FairPlay.
Yeah.
So you can't use common encryption there today.
But with FairPlay
No.
streaming, is common
No,
encryption?
Oh, well, I guess
Yeah.
with the newer stuff.
With the
yep,
FPS
yep,
just
yeah.
released at WWDC, yes. And if you look at what Netflix, go look at what Netflix does when it plays back using MSE EME in Safari.
Right.
And if
Yeah.
you go and inspect, if you go and look at the MP4 boxes, you'll see the PSSH headers for Widevine, FairPlay, and PlayReady.
So it's available to Netflix. Is it available to everyone?
Well, it
Can
used to be
everyone do
available with a
FairPlay?
special deal just
Yeah.
to Netflix because you're Netflix. But
Sure,
now
right.
I believe it's available to
Okay.
everyone.
I'm pretty sure
it's
Apple
in
made
OS,
it available.
it's in the desktop Safari, but I don't believe that there's
iOS, it's,
You can do it in iOS in an app, not in the browser.
yeah, you
That's
can
what-
do
that's
PlayReady
what I
on
was
iOS.
just-
doing that.
And it's very recent.
You
All
can
right,
do
well,
a
let's
FairPlay
move on to the
common
next
encryption.
topic because we've
nobody likes DRM anyway.
we-
They
Yeah,
just
but-
make us do it sometimes.
I'm just saying, if you
Well, they're
have
not
to
making
do
me
it today, though, build it that way, because you got to do common encryption, multi-DRM headers. Think of doing it right. Don't skimp on that. That'll save you a lot of grief
No,
later
it's okay to
on.
do it on the fly if you don't have tons and tons of users and you've
Yeah.
got servers laying around.
Yeah.
Right. All right, well, the next topic is one we've touched on a little bit during some of these, the previous two. It's streaming media in HTML5. So we used to rely on dedicated apps like Windows Media Player and Real Player, and then migrated to browser plugins such as Flash and Silverlight. Since Google Chrome stopped supporting such plugins in September, and the new Microsoft Edge browser doesn't support them either, we can't play back media across browsers the way we used to, targeting a single player in a single media format. So the good news is, as some of you have mentioned, is that after a slow start, the major browsers have implemented HTML5 extensions called media source extensions, which we've been referring to as MSE, and the encrypted media extensions, also known as EME, which allow playback of audio and video natively in the browser or in third-party players just by loading JavaScript libraries when the web page loads. So going back to some of these previous questions, the video playback format with HTML5 now is usually HLS or Dash in general. It's not perfect, and older versions of Internet Explorer and Windows don't support the HTML5 extensions, and neither will the stock browsers in Android or iOS, as far as I know. So if each browser is supporting different codecs...
Android, you can do Dash just fine.
You can now,
On
okay.
WebKit and on Chrome.
Okay, great, perfect. Well, that just adds a little more interest to the question. All right, so MSE seems like it's solving a lot of problems, but what's still missing in MSE, in
Nothing.
media source extensions? Nothing.
No, some things are
Yeah, go ahead, the advertising stuff.
Yeah, so the ads, what's
Who
tricky
likes
right
ads? We're talking about delivering video.
for the rest of the world, it has to put ads in. There's difficulty, and so in Dash you want to do multi-period playback or in any type of spinning up a new decoder. So if right now you new up a media source element, you add source buffers to it. If you want to specify different init content, you have to tear down your source buffers. You cannot instantiate a media source buffer in memory and then attach it to a video element to render it, which would be ideal. So you have this discontinuity as you start showing your primary content and then you switch to playing your ad content, even if you download the segments as fast as possible. So I run a Dash.js project, which is a MSE-based player. We're trying to make this free open source player where you can handle the complexity of adaptive playback and do it with MSE across devices. And that's one of our biggest problems, is getting this clean, instant, smooth transition between...
Now, hypothetically, if you were transmuxing it somewhere, you could do the...
Yeah, if we had a server-side solution and we can make it all look like one stream, but
So
then
just
we're avoiding the
hypothetically
problem by
using the...
pushing it down.
All
to the
right,
server.
but just hypothetically, like I was talking about transmuxing HLS into Dash in the browser, you could, if you wanted to be really like a bulldozer about it, not elegant, you could transmux it in the browser from Dash into new Dash and then shove it in.
But we're still,
No?
it's still the source, it's still the video element that's doing the decoding.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's the decoding we have to send new init headers to. And it's those that we can't change.
Okay.
So we would have to,
You
there's,
have to re-encode
yeah.
the...
When you ask, it's a little issue with MSE. There's a lot that's great about it. I think it's awesome. I think it's certainly a replacement for Flash. It's weird if you were at this conference 8 years ago maybe, and a lot of guys I know, we're all Flash developers, and we made spinning cubes that did Flash, and we got excited about it. And now you come here and you see HTML5 guys, we're making spinning cubes because we can do it again. Stuff that we used to do 8 years ago in Flash. So MSE is finally getting to the level of sophistication you actually want, where you can build real quality video players.
Yeah, I don't think they're major hurdles, and the people who edit the spec, the W3C, they're aware of this stuff. They'll fix it in a spec revision, I think.
And
It's not a big
there's
deal.
two different ways of doing HTML5 video, right? So if you're talking about Edge, where you can do Dash or HLS, where you just pop in the manifest and you don't actually have to have something like Dash.js or Shaka Player or Bitmoven's Player where you're feeding it into the media source API, or in Safari where you just pop in the HLS manifest, it's easier for sort of first-time developer. It doesn't give you the control you need, but it's a quick way to get things started. And that is sort of HTML5 adaptive video, but it's not MSE adaptive video.
Sort of black box
so, but I do think it's a good way for people to be like, because if you're developing the rest of your stuff, or if you're just like, you just want to throw up something on a page, like it's nice just to have the ability to not have to download Dash.js, and you haven't made that one easy.
Okay.
But you go to your website and you pop in the manifest and it gives you a little logo wherever you can see it. But it's nice to be able to pop it in actually the actual thing. So I wonder if philosophically the approach that Edge is taking, where they have EME and the ability to just put the manifest in the video tag, is maybe the correct one. I worry that too many people are going to depend on the.
But they have an operating system
Yeah.
underneath.
Yeah,
that
I don't think it's very. I don't think going forward you'll need a video solution to distribute video. The use case where you just sort of minimize your complexity and just sort of throw a file up and have adaptive bitrate and have multi-protocol, multi-DRM, there's just too much complexity today to expect you to just be able to put a file on on an FTP server and have it.
I mostly agree, but I would like to throw out much more of the stack if I'm going to throw out, like, that's just like the easy, like, way of getting it done. But like, I don't think, for example, I mean, HTTP is not actually, it's a protocol that was designed for delivering web pages. And the majority of the internet is video now. And we're still doing all of these tricks to try and deliver video as if it were web pages. And it's latent, it's all, I mean, RTMP, you know, was a pain in the ass, but it was low latency. And, you know, so like with WebRTC, there's other options. But I think, you know, there's a lot that can be done, but I think we should reevaluate the entire stack end-to-end for streaming, because the original goal for HLS was, look, you can do adaptive and you can do live, and all you need is a web server and a standard CDN. But now so much of the internet's video, we're still taking this approach where, like, it was a hack. Like, maybe there's something much better than this idea.
And there are better protocols being designed, like
There's the
Yes.
dash push
and you know,
effort.
so.
Yeah, push is awesome.
Yeah, HTTP2.
Yeah, HB2.
So, Will, you talked earlier about Flash and how everything's changing, and now we can do spinning cubes in HTML5. Does that mean 2016 is the year that Flash dies?
No, Flash will not die in 2016 at all. Flash is live and well in terms of volume. You look at a large event like the Olympics or the Super Bowl, through our network, about 45% of the volume is being delivered to Flash clients. So it's still a very vibrant part of the net, but it's absolutely going down. It's not going off a cliff, and it's not dropping. It's just going down like this. Everybody is making players today, and we all want to use MSE. We're still going to have a Flash fallback player.
But I mean,
'cause
it's not on
well,
mobile,
it's
right?
still,
I mean, you're saying
Yeah, it's
45% of the traffic, but
But that just shows you that 45% of the traffic is not on iOS and Android.
maybe for those type
That's-
of events.
So
close
what's
to
it
that-
for
close
large
to
events?
90% or
So I just
95%
built-
of desktop traffic.
I just built
Yeah.
an internal live streaming platform for Facebook over the last like 2 months, and it's pretty cool. But I didn't even implement Flash, and the event was on the 5th of November, and on the 3rd of November is when MSE plus H.264 started working on Firefox on a Mac. So I was like, I'm like, push out the update of the browser to everyone. But yeah, no, I didn't even implement Flash, and nobody complained. And I know that I'm living in a bubble with people with new computers, but
you are.
let's just no. But what I'm saying is, fast forward a couple of years, right? If that's the bubble of people with brand new expensive computers, that's sort of a microcosm of what you would expect things to be like in a couple of years.
Oh,
So
sure,
if I
yeah,
can
it's-
deploy a
It's
platform,
just going to take time. I think to Will's point, it's not.
and we
it's
don't
not the
require
cliff,
people to
it's
use
the-
specific browsers or whatever. We give them MacBooks or Lenovo ThinkPads or whatever, but like they can use whatever they want. And there was no Flash, and nobody noticed.
So would you recommend HTML5 for anybody who wants to deliver protected or unprotected content to both desktops and browsers at this point?
Again, I think.
You know, using MSE?
gotta have both.
if your audience,
can't fully do it.
If you have to
If
control
I
the
were to do
audience, yeah.
external, I would do the model where you have a sort of video.js style, you know, or what I think you guys are going to, where it's, you know, the JavaScript controls and all that kind of stuff, and then you do HTML5 if you can, and if not, you render that little frame in the background of Flash to do the decoding and the playback as a fallback, just like,
Yeah,
What-
all the major
All of them
players do it that
yeah,
nowadays.
that's the way
Yeah.
it's all done now. It's just a
But,
rendering.
and then eventually that little window of Flash in the background, because sometimes, like, there's going to be some use cases. We actually, like, have gotten rid of Flash internally. For the most part, they force you to, like, click to play on some websites, or on most websites. But, so just like there's going to be some people that are forced to not have Flash, or like people if they go with Safari. Safari, when you open up a new MacBook, right, doesn't have Flash. So there's going to be people who don't have Flash, and there's going to be people who still have IE6 with Flash, well, IE7 or 8, right?
Wow.
And so you still need to have that little window in the background if you're delivering to everyone, and you don't live in a microcosm, but the number of people getting that is going to just keep going down.
Yeah, okay. Well, let's move on to one final topic, and Colleen, you brought up a moment ago, which is WebRTC. Effectively, WebRTC is a standard that's analogous to HTML5, allowing web-based real-time communication between any two browsers without the need for plugins. Its primary use cases include video chats, voice calls, and data transfers between two or several participants. On the back end, the communications are happening using peer-to-peer technologies. With WebRTC, you may be able to reduce your dependencies on expensive telephony and video conferencing systems, or replace toll-free support lines with live video chat right on the support page of your website. So panelists, will WebRTC replace monolithic chat technologies such as Skype and FaceTime? And how does it fit in with other streaming media technologies that we've been talking about?
So it won't replace them because they're using it.
Right.
They're going
Yeah,
to-
exactly.
Yes.
They're applications
have.
for chatting. It's a technology for moving audio, video, and data between points.
But Skype has WebRTC on their website now,
Yeah.
if you don't want to install
So
that.
Skype will be the business, and they'll use WebRTC.
Nobody
I think
wants to install
the
apps.
interesting point for video distribution at very high scale is the data, the peer-to-peer component of the data channel to move segmented video around and then combine it with MSE and HTML5. So there's a whole bunch of startups coming in
Sure.
that. It's a very interesting space. They're getting
The peer
excellent
5 guys,
offload
yeah.
rates, both for live, especially for live, but also for VOD content. And I think we'll see more of that.
I've been testing a lot of that, and I use it internally, and it's really good stuff. Now, there is a privacy component to that, because if you're watching something nasty and you start getting bits from another IP address, an IP address is, in a sense, an identifiable piece of information. You know that other person is watching that thing. So in a corporate use case where you know that all the people are watching are hostages, in a sense, you know, you can be like, no, it's okay. If you're all watching the CEO, then that's fine. If you know the guy next to you is watching the CEO. But it is a little bit disingenuous for people to be like, oh, it's encrypted. We're delivering all these different things, and you're watching. But you are asking other people to carry load, even if they know they're carrying the load. Like, they don't necessarily realize the privacy implication of delivering those encrypted packets. But for things where that's not a problem, it's awesome. Now, a lot of people have different implementations of it as far as like efficiency. There's Pure 5, there's StreamRoot, there's vBlast. The one that I think is really interesting right now is the Polygon Cast one, which is just like a guy in Poland. And the thing about it is it's as easy to add to your website as like Google Analytics. It's like one line of JavaScript and intercepts the XHR headers and moves things around. So it's so simple of a technology to like implement this, and you get such, especially for live, like you get, because everyone's watching at the same time.
Live.
Like I think this is going to be a really, really big thing, particularly for corporate video.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen it most active within internal delivery use cases, so that these are the corporate environments that do want to deliver video at scale for usually a live event at scale to their internal network.
And I think it took a while for that spec to settle down. There was a big fight over codecs. There was a fight over rechartering the thing at the W3C. That all now seems to have been kind of settled. Microsoft wanted to do it one way, Google wanted to do it another way. So now that it's the standardization of it can really be finished, really. I mean, WebRTC 1 is not done. The spec is still, in flux. So
Okay.
I think as that solidifies, then it'll definitely be in much wider use. I think, well, to echo what everybody else said, it's very exciting stuff in certain environments and use cases. Doing it on a huge scale for like the Olympics or
That's
something.
the other thing I would
don't
like
know.
to mention is that there's so much that you can conceivably do, and I've played with some wacky hacks in it, and so this is a standard in a browser that opens up so many APIs. I think for low latency video, even if it is a live stream that is a linear live stream, if you want to do it in low latency, there's no reason why you can't combine, heavy temporal compression in like a linear live stream use case, but with WebRTC delivery. Now, when that comes to CDNs and stuff, I think that's going to be an interesting thing where it plays out to see if having a WebRTC style connection from the edge is going to be a feature to do like RTMP like latency.
Yeah, we could build a sub-second network, essentially, across the United States, probably mostly across the world, or within, say, sub-500, 600 millisecond distribution. I'm
Which
not
is-
saying we are, that's not a product statement, but we're certainly thinking about it.
And so now imagine that you have people in the audience now, and then they're getting a 500 millisecond stream or whatever, and then they raise their hand, and then in the browser they can instantly switch. You fade out, fade back in. Now they're instantly asking their question, and they can go back. Like
Yeah,
that's
nice.
awesome.
All right, so based on time, let me ask 2 more questions, and I'll ask for some quick answers from you, and then we'll open up to the floor for questions. So for each of you, what is the most interesting emerging technology that you're seeing related to streaming media deployments today? If you can pick just one.
Shipping software to coders and applications. Sorry. Go ahead.
Are we going down the line?
Yeah.
Sure,
Yeah,
let's go down
no,
there.
started.
Okay, it's for me certainly it's Dash. I think it's standardization that happened for television 80 years ago, and it built the broadcast industry. You can do the same for over the top, and it's also something we haven't discussed here as a technology. and I think Colleen alluded to it earlier, which is getting away from TCP delivery for all video and moving to some flavor
my
of
answer.
UDP.
I'm down with UDP.
Stole my answer.
UDP is just better for video all around, and I think you're going to see a lot of movement towards that in the future. And we didn't have time to talk about it today.
Another panel, perhaps.
Yeah,
All right,
those,
Michael.
Those are good ones. I think the shift towards lower level primitives, whether that's software-based decoding or a little bit higher level like MSE in the browser is the most interesting development. It gives a lot more flexibility to every sort of problem that you're facing around adaptive video delivery and opens up a lot of different possibilities.
Okay. John?
Since Will stole my UDP answer,
Can I change my answer to that one? Because I think that is a better answer, yes.
I actually would say that the peer-to-peer stuff it's very interesting. Whether or not it'll work at scale and everything else, it is a very interesting application of HTML5, WebRTC, all these things sort of munch together. So that's I think the most interesting
Okay.
in addition to UDP-based.
Ro?
I think it's a little bit of all the above. I got the last one, but it's really about like the maturation of HTML and all these standard components coming in, so that eventually we can start building one application to everything. Everybody talks about TV everywhere, but God, it's not TV everywhere. I mean, you got to do 20 bazillion things to just hit 75% of the devices. So, just seeing that maturation. And then in the back end, the protocols is going to be phenomenal now that the internet is much more robust than it was in the 90s when people started developing RTMP and RTP protocol. So I just think that maturation is just going to put us into a place where DRM is no longer going to be an issue. Hopefully, developing an app to multiple devices, you'll just be able to do this, and suddenly, boom, the next TV comes out, it works.
Yeah.
And then on these RTC protocols, I just have in my brain coming from, I used to do a lot of live events. I don't do it that much anymore. But I just think of all these cool things that haven't been done that could be done to where like everybody has a phone, we're all aware, and we basically create this like control panel to where everybody can see the feed, but you can see it from different visions and like, be able to really get creative.
Yeah, I mean, a reference use case that I've advocated for is imagine something like Wirecast, but you have all the cameras just going up into the cloud, and then your UI for controlling and switching is WebRTC because it's low enough latency.
Yep.
The output of that, you go into a GStreamer sync.
Yeah, exactly.
And
I
then
mean,
you can
that's
have a scalable
I wanted
CDN
to do that a
delivery.
couple of years ago. I wanted to say like, Radiohead, everybody bring their phone. It's a VIP concert. Everybody, certain type of phone, they can load this app and like, boom, boom. And now you're seeing everybody be the cameraman, and you have, you could be the director for certain feeds, or you can have an actual professional TD, switching on. I mean, the latency
Yeah, but he
is
could
so
be on
low.
his phone. You could have the TD somewhere in another country, and if the phone crashes or whatever, it's because the thing is, imagine getting rid of the video mixer and the audio mixer and putting it all somewhere, and then you just uplink from there.
I mean, that is cool. I mean, I hope that this kind of crowd thinks of those things and eventually comes up with something cool like that, and they go like, yeah, these two people are talking at a panel.
I was trying to convince Telestream to do it like 4 years ago, so how'd
I was
that
trying to
go?
convince Ustream to do it 2 years ago, too.
There's a few
Nothing happened.
I mean, Hangouts on Air has some of that, especially like the Pixel Core has like plugins for Hangouts on Air where they actually have like motorized sliders and they can switch, and that's all WebRTC in the browser, but that's the closest thing right now.
I think as we get more and more bandwidth, I mean, something like this is going to happen, and then with 4K coming up in 5 years, it might be a whole different, there's going to be so much resolution, so much information, so many things you can do. I don't know, it's going to be a whole different ballgame.
Right. All right, well, we have a few minutes left for questions. Are there any questions that folks would like to ask the panelists? Yes, sir, in the front row. What do you think about HDR?
I think it's more interesting than 4K, actually.
Yeah, I think you're gonna. There's diversity right now in which HDR do you use, hybrid log gamma or PQ or SL, but or the SMPTE one.
And HDR is high dynamic.
Sorry, high dynamic range. High dynamic range is the improving the visual quality of what you see, making the brighter parts brighter with respect to the darker parts. It's something your kids, your
Not
spouse,
artificially, like relative
no,
to content.
yeah. Everybody can see it, and it's resolution independent. Doesn't matter how close you're sitting to the TV or how far away. It just looks better.
If you've ever seen
And
it,
It'll make the image better,
If you-
hands down.
If you combine HDR with doubling the frame rate to 50, 60 hertz and going to Rec 2020 for color and going to 10-bit color, now you have this really visually stunning improvement or variant of UHD without 4K. So you can go there at 1080p, go there at 720p, and have fantastic looking content. That's probably going to come faster this year, as soon as HDR is stabilized. And the cool thing is televisions can support multiple HDR variants. So it may solve the chicken and egg problem. The TVs will support all of them, and then the content workflow, the camera and the workflow and the encoder have to agree on what they're going to support.
There's a good talk from DMUX that Stephen Robertson gave on sort of the real world, like if you have to deploy it today, like after he did research on all the formats, he came up with a pretty good recipe to be able to actually do it.
Can folks find that on the DMUX site?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know if they posted the videos yet.
If not, I'll just
So,
kick
yeah.
Stephen and tell him to do
Okay.
it again.
Cool. Other question? Yes, sir.
What new technology needs to be developed, or what problems are there going to be once we all have gigabit?
What new technologies or problems will we have once we have gigabit to the home?
Leaving the home, maybe?
VR, like
Virtual
doing
reality use case, I think, is something that.
light field VR streaming. So basically, right, you've got rectilinear video right now, and then you can have spherical video where you can rotate around. But you know, if it's 3D, it's only 3D on the horizon line, not up or down if you move your head. So the difference between that and what I think is real VR video, not spherical, is what I call twerking, which is basically like, it's not just you can rotate your head, but you can actually move your head within the scene and change your perspective. So if you gave me a gigabit to do that with, and I could figure out a lot of other crazy math stuff, I would do real-time light field video to the home. So you
Interesting.
could be in virtual reality and you could walk around.
I mean, for gaming, it's just like,
But the distribution problem, gig to your home, means there has to be 10 gig from the head end up, and there has to be terabit
they
gig
have
from
gig
there
to
to the
home
peering
in
point.
Sweden.
Yes, but it's somewhat, there's a great analogy. It's someone who gets gig to their home and expects it to increase their average internet performance.
Oh, no, it's
It's
just
like
to your
widening your
neighbor.
driveway and thinking it's going to shorten your commute to work. It's like the last little bit is super fast, but the rest of it isn't slow. So my point, to really make use of gig and to get real-time VR where you can translate in a 3D world, that whole chain that from the origin through the distribution tree to you with your gig at the end has to up its bitrate dramatically. 'Cause
Right.
it-
And it also depends on what's serving up now. If the VR is being generated at an edge and it's properly peered, you know, that's helpful.
Sure, we still got to get from edge through an ISP. My point is the ISP has to be dealing at bit rates way higher than a gig. And today, a lot of them are. Like, certainly the big ones are. But
Yeah, but what I'm saying is in Sweden, like it'll happen in small places. Like in Sweden, since 2008, I know that SC for Akamai, in fact, in Sweden had gig to this house. But you know, it's a problem, right? Like he could only transfer. He's like, I just transferred a DVD in 3 seconds. I'm like, yeah, to who? To another dude in Sweden? You mean?
Yeah, right.
Like otherwise.
All right, let's end the
Yeah.
conversation there because we're at time and I want to be respectful of the audience's time. So thank you all for being here and being panelists and answering the questions, and thank you for joining us.